These chess sets are family heirlooms. They're passed on from generation to generation. They change over the years as pieces are worn out and replaced. You can see that the pieces here are well worn. And the chess sets of Mongolia have special meaning to the family that produces them. Each set is made for a particular family by that family, usually hand carved in wood like these are. And let's talk about the pieces here. This is a rook. It's a cart, and the word for it in Mongolian means cart. However, over here you've got an updated version where they've made theirs into a truck. Of course, the horses are always horses, and they're very important to Mongolia. That one of the great arts of Mongolian life is horseback riding. They say that people are practically born riding horses there. And actually chess is also one of the great arts of Mongolia, not so well known, but people who play chess are held in very high esteem. They're even said to be on a path of living on and on, as if chess would keep them alive forever. There's a sort of a mythology that they're learning to fight against the elements by playing chess and actually overcoming death. You can see the beautiful detail on this. He's an old guy, been around for a long time, and there's no telling exactly how old these pieces are, but you can tell by how worn they are. Actually, most of them were painted originally, but most of the paint is worn off. A set like this has really been played with for a long time. Let's talk about the queen here. The queen is called Bers. The name probably comes from the Persian fairs, which was the advisor to the king in the old Persian game, but Bers actually means snow leopard. Even so, these guys are more like dogs or lions, and there's a relationship to the Chinese mythological lion dog. Just a great figure you've probably seen in front of Chinese restaurants and so on. It's a very famous figure. There are no lions as such native to Mongolia, but it's come to them as a mythological creature. The pieces in front, the pawns I mean, are actually called children. The word for them, hu, means children, but they're often depicted as animals, as these are. These are something like maybe marmots or something, little critters that live up in the high altitudes. Over here we've got birds on this side. Now this board would not have been one of the original boards. Of course, it's somewhat old. I'm pretty sure it's made of silk here, and this would have come in later on. The chess boards with the checkers like this were introduced in the middle of the 20th century. The original Mongol boards had just lines drawn, often simply on paper, just a grid of 8x8 squares drawn with lines, as is true of most of the old forms of chess. The checkerboard style is actually a European innovation. You'll also notice that the pieces don't have any change or a difference of coloration per se. They face each other, and each person knows that their pieces represent the particular clan that they're playing for, and that's generally enough in the Mongolian tradition. Also in the middle, well, I guess more like in the 19th century, they started to get colors, but even though they're painted now, the traditional pieces just don't have color. Now here's another set that's much more modern. This is not a family heirloom, but it maintains the Mongolian tradition. You see, it all rolls up and fits into a canister like this. This is a yak's wool mat that it rolls up in there, and then once it's rolled up, the pieces go inside of it. And you can see they've got the traditional Mongolian forms. Here the rook has become a tent, which is also a very common form for rook. Actually, the form of rooks in Mongolian chess is very widespread. It could be just a bunch of peacock feathers, it can be a yin-yang symbol or a karmic wheel. there's a lot of things that the rook can be. Of course, the horse is almost always what depicts a knight, sometimes with a rider. Camel, even though it's similar to the Indian camel, Indian bishop in that they also use a camel, this one is the type with 2 humps, whereas the dromedary is in the Indian sets with just 1 hump. Now this is a sort of concession to European sets. The queen is actually a queen. That's not normal for most forms of sets. Usually the king's helper is an advisor, or in the Mongolian sets, more often even, it's that lion we talked about, lion, dog. The pawns can be anything made small. In this case, they're camels. Notice they're a little bit different from the camel, which represents the bishop. And over on the other side, they're the horses. And they're a little bit different from the horse that represents the knight. Once again, the king and queen stand together, all bundled up like that for enduring those northern climes. And then I've got a few more sets similar to this, but let's look at this one. These guys are little boys. And in fact, as I mentioned, the word for that piece is the word that means child. But look, there are little girls on this side. It's boys against girls. And the kings and queens are kings and queens. But you'll notice they have very different styles. Look at this king and queen with his shaved hair and her big bouffant. And look at this queen and king with their hats on. So they very often, pretty much always, in some way represent 2 opposing forces. They can be forces of good and evil. They can be the Chinese against the Mongolians. They can be the one tribe against another tribe. See, the same thing is going on here. And this is another very common theme. Besides chess and horse riding, wrestling is very big in Mongolia. They have a tradition of wrestling in their special events. And here, each pawn is 2 wrestlers. 2 wrestlers. And the rest of the pieces are figures very much like the other ones we saw in these modern sets. Now here is something a little more traditional, although it's also made for general play. It's not a family set. This is a very good example of a tent or a yurt on wheels, and these things actually exist in Mongolia. You can actually build a tent on a great big platform and roll it around the savannah. It's not just a made-up thing, because there are tents and there are carts, and this is a tent and a cart. It's kind of a figure that represents both at the same time. Now this is very common. You've got the lion dog creature here, and they also often have wings too. This is a flying lion dog, very great mythical creature. And the lion dog's offspring are the pawns, so these are her children, and they also are the same thing. A little bit smaller, so you know who's who. But this is a very common form of the pawns, to be miniatures of the big one. And as always, the king is a guy sitting in the chair there. The word noyan for king actually means like the head of a village. And so there's always just somebody sitting in a throne or just on a seat representing him. The camels, horses, books. Very similar set, smaller, and this one comes a little closer to our sets in that they've got foot soldiers for pawns. Now almost every chess form in the world considers the pawns to be foot soldiers, and so this also is using that, even though the traditional Mongolian pawns can be just about anything. Okay, now I'd like to show you one more really interesting set. This set really shows you the variety of pieces and how much can change as the set is inside of a certain clan, in a certain family, over years and years. Pieces are replaced, pieces are recarved, pieces are deeply worn. Here you go. So in this set, you do in fact have a horse These ones, I'm sorry, you do in fact have a cart. These ones are pulled by camels. On the other side, they are pulled by horses. You have, of course, horses, and they're all different. This one's very tall, and you can see the paint that's been worn off of that one. They've been carved and pulled together from many sets. The bishops are camels. This one is smaller, and you can see that it's been worn over many games. And here is a smaller, even smaller camel, which looks like it's a more recent addition to this set. Makes you wonder what might have happened that caused the camels on this side to be renewed. The kings are beautiful sculptures. They look like little Buddhas sitting there in their thrones, and they certainly show the marks of age. The pawns are very interesting. This is a very nice example of this type of a lion dog figure. And notice how their tails are all puffed up in the back there. And each one is quite different from the others. Then these ones are also different, but these guys have their tails kind of long tails going up on their backs. So perhaps this is in fact a snow leopard, which is the child of the snow leopard figure. Once again, this set would be very old, and the board woven here of silk would be a more recent addition to this set. So, Mongolian chess. It's a tradition that has been with them for centuries, and they're so proficient at it that it's been reported that men riding camels will just call out the moves of a chess game to each other, playing essentially blindfolded without seeing the board. They're so acquainted with the game, and they like it so much. Mongolian chess.